Hello, welcome to Local Edition. I'm Leslie Layton. Unfunded pension liabilities. It's enough to make your eyes glaze over. What do we want to know about this? Why the heck should we care about unfunded pension liabilities? Well, when you hear from our next guest, you might understand why we should all care about it. His name is Craig Young. He is the finance chair for the Association of California Cities, Orange County. Welcome.
Good to be here again. Thank you.
So unfunded pension liabilities, it's a theme that continues to come up with all of the people that we've been talking with today because it is a big issue, but it's hard to get your head around. Why should we care about this?
That's a great question. Why should we care? And we should care because we've made promises to our employees. We've been promising on the public sector side that we would provide for their retirement, but if we don't have enough money to be able to fund that, we're going to have to break those promises. And to me, that's probably top priority of government, is to make sure that you fulfill the promises that you've made. Where that really takes us from there is to be careful with what promises we make for the future. So that's my key point.
I think people who haven't been really listening to the conversation about unfunded pension liabilities are thinking, well, maybe the people who are running the cities and the counties, they're just not doing their job. They're not doing it right. They're not balancing the budget. They're not being fiscally responsible. So I think people might want to know how it got to be this way so quickly. Why is it the way it is?
And that's another great question. And I think the answer is wrapped into how you started, Leslie. You said this is a really difficult issue that most people will glaze over a bit when they hear it because you're dealing with lots and lots of numbers. I remember I had a colleague I was sitting on a panel with not too many years ago who said if you provide your public with more than 2 sets of numbers, they're just going to glaze over, they're not going to understand it. And yet when you're dealing with the unfunded pension liabilities and the liabilities on top of those liabilities, you have to really be a numbers guy or a numbers gal to understand the ramification of what's going to happen in the future.
Your group, the Association of California Cities, is looking into this. How is this affecting cities and how they operate and what could potentially happen in the future?
Well, this group has been around for a while, and my predecessors, I've been on the committee for quite a while, my predecessor chair who began really had a great focus of trying to tackle the unfunded pension liabilities about 4 years ago when it was a big issue. The good news is by raising awareness within Orange County and then elevating it to the state level, the governor actually adopted several of the points that came out of that committee, which helped create the PEPRA legislation that existed, which changed the promises for the future employees. And that's part of the solution, is understanding what we can actually promise for those futures.
So promising for the future may be some way to deal with it moving forward, but the past obligations, a deal is a deal, you know, especially the unions would say, we were hired, we worked under this, and we deserve to be paid the way we were promised.
Right, and that's why I started with you want to keep your promises. So those promises we've already made, we need to make sure we keep those, and then we need to make sure we make promises that we can keep for the future.
In your opinion, is there an intersection where these unfunded pension liabilities and the budgets of cities and counties can't keep up?
Is there an intersection? Absolutely. And the problem.
Where is that?
Well,
how far down the road?
That depends on a number of conditions, but I think
returns on your investments
it's
and
much
how the
closer than we think. Yeah. If I may, lay out dominoes that could fall. Part of the reason the Association of California Cities exists is to, I mean, even back up. You've heard that all politics are local, right? I have a perception that all local politics are regional. And so we try to tackle the problem from a regional level. In my city, I'm also council member in the city of Yorba Linda, we are very strong financially. We don't have any city debt. Unfunded pension liabilities are not technically debt from that perspective. So we have no actual debt. We have very strong cash reserves. And yet, if one of our sister cities in the county has a hiccup and ends up going into bankruptcy, that's a domino that'll affect us even though we are strong. So that's what complicates the answer to your question even further. I mean, your question was how close is the edge of the cliff? Well, it depends on who starts falling off, because you stand on the edge, you start to fall off, that crumbles the edge a little bit, which makes people who thought they were more safe closer to the edge than they thought initially.
Which could create a huge problem if many cities throughout the state have the same problem at the same time. I mean, people make the argument for buying California bonds and stuff because, oh, they'll never go bankrupt, they'll never have a problem, but what happens if that happens?
Right, well, never use universal absolutes, right? Of course, I just did one right then.
So the ACC-OC has a board of directors. They're looking ahead at a work plan. What does that entail?
The work plan begins with education. It begins with helping, those with responsibilities for leading the cities to understand what the problem is. We have targets we want to hit, but if you can't really identify the target, how are you going to hit the bullseye? And so part of it is education to explain what is the unfunded liability for our cities, for our county, for our state, and even the federal as we go beyond that.
What about people who are watching this going, well, what am I going to do about it?
Well, part of it is to begin to vote properly, right? We are here at election season, 26 days to go, and you can elect city council members and all the way up the entire ticket based on who you like for a variety of reasons. I'm hoping that when people punch that ticket, they're looking for folks who have a financial sense about them as well, that they are able to tackle some of these difficult issues that we have.
Let's talk about the Association of California Cities and who that is and who the board is comprised of and how it operates to draw its conclusions on these.
Yeah, the ACC, we call it for short, Association of California Cities, is a group in Orange County made up of cities. We have almost all of our 35 cities in Orange County?
I think that's
34,
right.
35? And so it's made up of city council members from those cities who jointly gather together to talk about difficult issues like this. And then the board would be a group that is chosen from those city representatives.
So what do you see that you're going to be doing moving forward in terms of working with the cities and the public in terms of education?
Well, again, it goes back to identifying what is the real problem. Perhaps it helps if we look at what the state is. If you look at the unfunded liabilities for the state of California, the numbers are all over the board, but if we understand the common number, they say that the unfunded pension liability is equal to about $25,000 per person. So for me and my family, I have a family of 4. That means that our household would owe $100,000 to be able to get ourselves, the state, out of that debt. And yet, part of the education that we want to bring to the county is the pension liability is just one of the unfunded liabilities that are hitting our cities. In addition to that, we have what's called OPEB, other public employee benefits, which would be your medical and your dental and things like that. And that unfunded liability for my town, for Yorba Linda, is a little more, it just about doubles the amount. So $25,000 times the 4 in our family, $100,000, grew to $200,000. And then if you count our infrastructure as well, my responsibility at our home is over $500,000. And suddenly that's a problem. And if our leaders can understand how big the problem is, and therefore how close some of the cities might be to the edge of the cliff, it raises the necessity to deal with it.
You're no fun at all. This is like somebody wants to call the cops on a party that's really a lot of fun. It's information that people really don't want to hear, but maybe people need to hear. I mean, are there circumstances that could change just as we got into this mess pretty quickly, that we could get out of it relatively more painlessly than you're describing?
Oh, you won't like my non-fun answer, probably.
Still don't like you, okay.
Yeah, I don't think so, because part of the reason we are where we are is we assume that the groups doing the investment are going to earn a fairly significant rate of return. And yet, when you're talking about absolute promises that you have to keep, like we have here, we ought to go with a much more conservative rate of return as opposed to the aggressive one.
Man, Craig Young, thanks for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us.
Right.
I'm Leslie Layton.